This is Challenger Approaching, where we take a character who isn't playable in Smash Bros. Yet and craft a detailed design for what they could be like if they made it in for real. Up this time is someone whose home series' current era is rather underrepresented. Kirby's undergone a renaissance of sorts ever since his return to Dreamland in 2011, one that, through several twists of fate, hasn't had much content in Smash so far. And characters who've risen to prominence in that era have also missed out, including one whose ever-growing fanbase keeps hoping he can join his friends one day. But could that finally come to pass next time? And how could he stand out as a newcomer beyond just his choice of weapon? Let's see how this hopeful is more than just some enemy with a fancy hat. Bandana Dee! Bandana Waddle Dee is a character who has come a long way. His first appearance was way back in 1996 as Kirby Superstar, with a bit role in the minigame Megaton Punch as Kirby's first opponent, and a complete pushover. After that, he stayed in the background for a long time. Unless he was the Waddle Dee in Kirby 64, I'm legit surprised Hal hasn't said one way or the other. Until he showed up again in the remake of Kirby Superstar. This time he got a sort of speaking role in the new Revenge of the King mode as DDD's personal bodyguard, reacting as Kirby stormed the royal castle. Even got to be the sole spectator of DDD's ultimate grudge match, showing undying loyalty to someone who didn't yet deserve it. But Bandana Dee's breakout role came a few years later. Kirby's return to Dreamland put him front and center as its fourth player character, brandishing a spear and adventuring alongside his liege and Kirby and Meta Knight. Not only did he pull his weight the entire way, he also befriended Kirby during it, unless he was the Waddle Dee in 64, which again is still somehow unconfirmed. With DDD trying to be less actively villainous nowadays, when not brainwashed or mind-controlled again, Bandana Dee has been free to join Kirby on his own adventures as a recurring character. And by that I mean, has been involved in every single mainline title since. Not even Meta Knight can lay claim to that. So yeah, this guy's a real rising star. From background NPC to filler player character to gaining a distinct identity as Kirby's modern era has continued. At this point, he's legitimately main character number 4. And to say he's picked up a following would be an understatement. Had a modest one already in the lead up to Smash 4, but since then, his fanbase has grown exponentially. With how big a deal Bandana Dee has become and how popular the Kirby series is worldwide with no real regional blind spots, he might legitimately have the biggest support base of any Smash hopeful who hasn't made it in yet. So it's pretty easy to call him a frontrunner for Smash 6 or whatever happens next. But that doesn't mean his invite's already in the mail just yet. Sometimes it takes a while for a character to make it. The ones you see here took multiple games for Sakurai and his team to figure out fighter concepts that felt good enough. And sometimes characters get left out because there are other priorities. Since bringing back every veteran in series history was such a huge task, Ultimate's devs were only able to fit in half as many newcomers as past games had. But despite his poor fortune so far, this particular character is a huge deal now, and his support just keeps growing. And like with his accomplishments in his home series, it's only a matter of time until that can't be overlooked any longer. So when that time comes, how could Bandana Dee fight in Smash? So, Bandana Dee's basic design is simple and appealing as always, but there's something extra we can give him. You know how DDD has a custom hammer design in Smash with a jet engine built in that he can activate at will? Well, now his most loyal guard is getting a signature weapon too, a gift from DDD in honor of his services to the realm, and most definitely not out of personal gratitude or anything. What would give you that idea? This custom-built polearm is not only tailored to Bandana Dee's abilities, it has a couple extra features that we'll talk about when we get to his moveset. For now, how can we bring his personality to life? Formerly the generic everyman of the main 4, Bandana Dee has developed into something more over the last 12 years. He may lack the special powers of his companions, but he's determined to prove he can still measure up to them. With a focus on finesse and skill over superpowered strength or speed, he's got that lovable underdog energy, mixed with a surprising amount of determination. This could even show up in his idle animations, with one where he looks around like he can't believe he's finally here, but eager to prove he belongs. How about alternate costumes? Beyond the default, Bandana Dee's had 2 recurring alternates across multiple games. Green and yellow have shown up since Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, and they're natural fits here. Next is this cyan palette that's also shown up as an alt in some spin-offs like Kirby Fighters. After that, a purple one inspired by the palette enemy Waddle Dees take during the Revenge of the King mode in Superstar Ultra. After that, a primal brown that draws from the Sasquatch-like Grand D enemies from the 3DS games. Then an obligatory retro grayscale palette. And finally, what better for the last alt than one based on Kirby himself? Rounds out the colors nicely, doesn't it? Alright, let's start with Bandana Dee's fighting style. And for that, how about something that not only feels in character, but also fits his species? Waddle Dees have shown to be very adaptable, picking up different roles and odd jobs with little trouble. Fitting that, Bandana Dee's moveset will cover a wide array of ranges, angles, and timings. Even has projectiles for attacking campier opponents. But since he fights mainly with a spear, Bandana Dee's playstyle has an extra lean on footsies-based combat. By spacing attacks with his weapon's disjointed hitboxes, he can directly contest hand-to-hand brawlers from outside their range without putting himself at risk unless they slip through. This is his default game plan. His other tools are there to help make accomplishing it easier. As for detailed stats, speaking of Waddle Dees being well-rounded, a lot of these are pretty middling. Initial dash and run speeds are just under the median, and airspeed isn't very far below average either. His initial dash is actually the exact same speed as Kirby's. Damage output, combo prowess, and knockout power are also average to somewhat below. And in a first for Kirby characters in Smash, Bandana Dee doesn't have multiple mid-air jumps, opting for a regular full-height double jump instead. He's had little mid-air hops in his games for gameplay purposes since those are built around Kirby's mobility, but in Smash, he's free to do more of his own thing. That said, some of these stats are less impressive. Bandana Dee's weight is in the bottom 5th of the roster, near the lower end of the lightweight tier, though ironically 1 point heavier than Zero was last episode. He can't afford to take many stray hits or trade with opponents too often, and while being pretty floaty lets him space aerials better, it also means he takes longer to land if sent high up by an enemy attack and is open to getting juggled like a beach ball if he's not careful. But just like how there's more to Bandana Dee than meets the eye, these stats don't tell the full picture. He has advantages that don't show up in the raw numbers, like his weapon's range, his mix-up potential, and extra versatility on certain moves. And a couple of his stats are actually pretty good. Being so small makes him trickier to hit, and since he fights with a spear, he doesn't have to get up close to opponents like most shorties do. And his recovery is legitimately great. Even if he gets hit halfway to Popstar, he's capable of making it back. Now, how about Bandana Dee's moveset? Let's start with the basics. His jab combo begins with a quick, short jab of his spear, then another at a raised angle, then a rapid barrage of strikes based on the spear ability's flurry attack. Doesn't reach as far as in his games since the spear doesn't stretch out the same way, but it's still pretty quick for a disjointed jab and deals solid damage. Bandana Dee's forward tilt is a simple forward thrust of his spear that puts its range to use. Again, not as much reach as in its source material, but still plenty enough to space around enemies and be a cornerstone of his kit. You can even angle it up or down to strike opponents' heads or feet. Bandana Dee's up tilt is kind of new. A quick twirl of his spear above his head, spinning it around twice, then bringing it back to his side in one smooth motion. It only deals one hit, but its wide hitbox makes it a great anti-air and combo starter. This character's up for learning moves from others, as Bandana Dee's down tilt is his own version of Kirby's sliding kick. A burst option that sneaks under higher attacks, he doesn't recoil off people on hit like in his games, but it does have situational follow-ups if he connects near the end of it. Then for his dash attack, Bandana Dee sticks his spear into the ground mid-run and uses it to vault forward into a flying tackle, based on a move Kirby doesn't get from the spear ability, which means Bandana Dee likely came up with it himself. It travels at a lower angle than in his games and does so much faster, covering a long distance with surprising power, but also a lot of end lag, so don't whiff. That's not the only thing he came up with. Let's see those smash attacks. Bandana Dee's forward smash has him slide forward, scrape his spear along the ground, and deliver a powerful upward slash. A legitimately strong finisher that covers a wide arc and even moves him forward half a dash length. Less than in his games, but still enough to connect with it easier. Downside is its lengthy startup. Bandana Dee's up smash spins off an existing move. He aims his spear upward and performs 3 quick stabs, one aimed slightly forward, one slightly back, and a final straight up. A multi-hit with great vertical reach, legit power, and surprisingly solid startup that makes it one of his best finishers. Then his down smash has Bandana Dee drop his spear down and sweep it 360 degrees across the ground. With a combination of range and speed, it's great for catching rolls or making less risky reads, but the hitbox is easily jumped over and it doesn't KO reliably until very late. Bandana Dee's aerials start pretty normally. Similar to what Super Smash Flash 2 gave him, his neutral air has him spin his spear in a circle vertically, protecting himself and dealing multiple hits to anyone nearby. A decently fast pressure breaker that helps with defense and can combo a little. But for the others, you know those extra features I alluded to? One of them lets him separate the head of his spear and deploy his parasol from Kirby Battle Royale out of the front instead. He swings this parasol for his forward air, as a mid-air spacing tool with a bit less range than his spear attacks but a bigger hitbox in front, ideal for aerial combat. While this parasol may be normal by Dreamland standards, Bandana Dee still makes the most of it. For his back air, he thrusts it behind him and spins it in place like a drill for multiple hits. While it doesn't propel him forward like its counterpart in the games, it still deals a lot of damage, and the final hit can even net knockouts off stage. Then Bandana Dee swings the parasol upward for his up air, and this version generates a splash of water that surrounds it, instead of reaching past the parasol like in his games. Has a surprisingly big hitbox, with a sweet spot on the parasol itself that can KO, and a sour spot on the water. And for his down air, Bandana Dee sticks his spear below him and spins as he falls, striking anyone below multiple times. Unlike in his games, this actually isn't a stall and fall. He falls normally during it, sort of like Mii Sword Fighter's down air. This is why its name isn't Moondrop. It's not the original move, it's another variant. Bandana Dee's grab game works like usual for weapon wielders. Grab animations have him reach out with his free hand, with startup comparable to the average sword fighter but below average range, which he makes up for when he does grab someone, starting with a headbutt pummel that deals above average damage. And he has all kinds of ways to throw his opponents, like a forward throw where Bandana Dee rears back and flings them like a javelin, good for sending people off stage. His back throw shoves them behind him with a backward stab of his spear, based on a move that normally requires a regular attack first, but he takes a shortcut here. Bandana Dee's up throw activates the parasol again and bounces the opponent on it a couple times before flinging them upward. This unassuming move is actually a kill throw of above average strength. And for his down throw, he short hops into the air and comes down with a surprisingly powerful punch. Not only does it deal double-digit damage, he can combo off it up through 50%. More competent at grappling than he looks, eh? Finally, let's go over a few taunts. How about an up taunt where Bandana Dee imitates his liege, raising his weapon into the air boastfully? It's not as intimidating since he's not as big, but don't underestimate him. Then his side taunt is a spin move imitating Kirby's, finishing by holding his spear in a triumphant pose. And his down taunt has him cheer like one of his other emotes in Return to Dreamland Deluxe. As dedicated as he is to improving himself, he's still happy to be here. Alright, what does Bandana Dee have for specials? His neutral special might or might not be what you'd expect, because it turns out his weapon has another alt mode. You see that orb on the base of his spear? It's just like the one on Beam Kirby's wand, able to fully replicate a Waddle Dee's abilities. On use, Bandana Dee flips his spear around and aims the orb forward. From there, he can perform 2 different attacks. Tap B to have him swing it normally, creating a whip-like electric beam that travels in an arc above and in front of him. The beam deals multiple hits to opponents while knocking them away lightly, covering a wide range of approach angles. But if you hold B, Bandana Dee charges the orb with electricity, and after holding it for a short time, he releases it as a powerful wave beam. While it only deals a single hit, it's bigger, stronger, and reaches its full charge faster than similar moves. Beam Spear is a versatile attack with 2 different functions. Tap to wall out approaching opponents, or hold to pressure them from a distance. Turns out Bandana Dee can zone a little too if necessary. While both versions are useful, they also have flaws. The tapped version deals okay damage, but won't KO at any meaningful percent, and the charged version is decently strong, but pales in comparison to a full-power charge beam or shadow ball. You also can't store the charge for later, and it'll go off on its own after you hold it for a couple seconds. One special down? Now how about the next? If you're familiar with this character at all, you saw this one coming. A key move in the spear ability's arsenal since its debut, of course its signature user would have it. Press forward and B, and Bandana Dee picks his spear up and hurls it in an arc. Its unique angle travels over opposing projectiles or other obstructions at the height you threw it at, poking at opponents who try to keep their distance from you. Which sounds simple, but this move also has another feature. If used while running, or in midair shortly after jumping out of a run, Bandana Dee throws his spear faster and more forcefully, which lets it travel further, deal more damage, and target foes from even further away. Spear throw is an unusual projectile that can zone in a pinch, but its main use is actually countering enemy zoning or dealing with people trying to camp you out in general. Pester them enough with it, and they'll be forced to fight you more directly, which lets your disjointed attacks do their thing. That said, this move won't ever take stocks outright, and since its knockback is diagonal, all you'll get against most recoveries is free damage. Oh, and don't worry about being left without a way to defend yourself. Another spear appears in Bandana Dee's hand right before this move's end lag wraps up, even if the spear he threw is still falling. Now for the up special. Once again, there's something that kinda has to go here. Yep, there it is. Another key part of the ability's kit, Spear Copter's vertical lift is a natural fit here, and Bandana Dee has his own version of this too. On use, he holds his spear aloft and begins to charge. Let go, and he spins it like a propeller so forcefully that it carries him upward. Our version has him rise much faster than in his games, reaching a pretty good height by default that can be steered left or right for more flexible recovery. It also drags opponents along, striking multiple times as he rises, with just enough knockback on the final hit to keep you safe from retaliation. But if you hold the charge for longer at the start, the copter rises further and does so even faster. Hold long enough and you can extend its max height significantly. Waddle Copter is a strong recovery move with, you guessed it, extra versatility using its ability to charge. Bandana Dee may not have extra jumps here, but this thing carries him far enough that he can afford to go off stage for deep edge guards anyway. Though it's different from the original in a couple other ways too. Bandana Dee slows his descent if you charge it in midair, he goes into freefall after it's over, and he stops spinning the spear shortly after reaching his max height. Being able to hold it for super long like in his games would make it too good at juggling otherwise. So what do we do for his down special? This one might seem generic at first, but there's more to it than it seems. Parasol Dive is a recurring move itself, letting Bandana Dee get extra use out of that mode too. Press down and B, and he deploys the parasol and dives downward at a steep diagonal angle, knocking away any enemies in his path. Deals a single hit of moderate strength with a surprisingly wide hitbox, since a pair of little stars spin around the parasol during it. You can hold B to extend the dive for extra time, and if you hit the ground or a platform during it, you get an extra landing hitbox. But what if you're already on the ground? You get another variant, as Bandana Dee hops in place and twirls the parasol underneath him instead for a multi-hit attack that completely covers him, deals surprisingly high damage, and is functionally an alternate down smash. Parasol Dive is yet another surprisingly versatile attack that clears the area whether you're on the ground or in the air. The mid-air version helps mix up your landings when you're trying to get down in a disadvantaged state, while the grounded one catches errant dodges or get-up options. The latter's better damage and coverage but middling horizontal reach pairs well with the actual down smash's great range but lesser power, though the air and ground versions both last a while, making this move quite punishable if it doesn't hit. Now, let's finish this. Bandana Dee needs a final smash, and I say, what better for his ultimate attack than where it all began. Powered up by the Smash Ball, Bandana Dee signals to off-screen and backs up as a pair of massive cinder blocks drop down from above. Any opponent in their path gets popped upward and lands atop the blocks in a helpless state. If someone does get hit, the camera zooms in and Bandana Dee leaps into action and gathers his strength to its absolute limits, represented through visuals based on the original minigame that depict a meter filling up, two reticles intersecting, and a pendulum swinging through a circular sweet spot. These are just for visual flair, because Bandana Dee nails the timing of all three perfectly by himself. Then he leaps up, channels everything he's got into one stubby hand, and delivers a megaton punch so powerful it could crack a planet in two. The cinder blocks completely shattered. Anyone on top of them sent flying. And if they had any serious damage beforehand, their stocks are done for. This is how Bandana Dee could fight in Smash, a rising star who now stands alongside the friends he once idolized. With his mastery of the spear and other weapons and techniques, he overcomes his lack of innate powers through training and determination, not only embodying a unique fighting style, but also representing all of the little guys hoping to prove they can matter too. Bandana Dee's well-rounded moveset lets him space attacks with his spear, poke at opponents from a distance, and even have a few fallback options close up. With hitboxes that cover all kinds of angles and timings, he can adapt to enemy mix-ups with ease. And he's particularly skilled at mid-range combat, using disjointed strikes to control the flow of battle and force opponents to find answers. However, most of his stats range from middling to outright bad. He has to use his tools to punch above his weight to compensate for them. Most of his attacks aren't very fast, requiring good spacing and timing to keep opponents at arm's length. And without many ways to deal a ton of damage at once or cheese stocks early, he has to win through steady, consistent play and hope that it's enough. This one's interesting to talk about since so many fan designs follow similar beats. I am far from the first to mix Parasol and Beam in with his spear attacks or use Megaton Punch as his final smash. But the details are where things diverge, and several decisions I made were to keep things clean and coherent. I limited Parasol to just 5 moves and Beam to just his neutral special to put focus on his spear attacks. Was looking at Capture Beam as a potential throw, but I ultimately scrapped it. Some decisions came down to balancing an intended playstyle, which is why, for example, Spear Throw can't fire off 3 at once, so his zoning isn't too strong, and he lacks multiple mid-air jumps, so he can't throw out constant aerials in one spot as a defensive wall of pain. He also got a variant of Moondrop instead of the real thing because Parasol Dive already has stall and fall movement, and hopefully having a signature weapon doesn't make him feel too special. It may have 3 modes in one, but they're just a normal Spear, Parasol, and Beam wand by Dreamland standards. Everything he does with them is all his own abilities. Hope I managed to show the potential this guy has as a newcomer, and why he's become so incredibly popular. At this point, Bandana Dee is legitimately one of the biggest glaring omissions from the roster. Things haven't broken his way for the last 2 games, but maybe third time will be the charm? Hopefully. Special thanks to these folks for helping make this video happen. They've helped with other content too, like these you see here if one piques your interest. I even have an old version of this newcomer concept from years ago, though fair warning, it hasn't aged well. Thanks as well to my patrons for their continued support. And now they have a role to play. Anyone currently supporting me on Patreon can vote on which of these 3 characters gets an episode next. Told you we'd get to Mio eventually. So, until next time, may the rest of your day be delightful. Okay, yeah, that pun was really bad.